Okay, let's get started. So welcome to the Know to Prevent monthly virtual speaker series. Know to Prevent is a collaboration of youth-focused coalitions and agencies in Westchester working together to provide parents and caregivers with essential tools to increase resiliency and to reduce risky behaviors in our youth. So for more information on the collaborative and upcoming presentations, as well as links to the recordings of our previous presentations, please visit www.knowtoprevent.org. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. Tonight's presentation is being recorded. All of the participants will receive a link tomorrow containing the recording, as well as a handout called the tip jar. The tip jar will highlight key takeaways, information, and prompts from tonight's speaker for you to keep as a reference. There will be a live Q&A session at the end of the presentation, and we encourage all of you to type in any questions you may have in the Q&A box at any time. So at this time, I'd like to introduce, hold on just one second. Okay, I would like to introduce our one of our lead coalition sponsors, Kathi Cucciarella, who is the coalition coordinator for Somers Partners in Prevention.
Hi, good evening, everyone, and thank you, Lisa. I am Kathi Cucciarella, chairperson and drug-free communities coordinator for the town of Somers Partners in Prevention. Somers Partners in Prevention has been in existence for over 50 years, so we are a long-standing community coalition. Our mission is to build a safer community by efficiently addressing alcohol and drug use, as well as other risk-taking behaviors through advocacy, hope, and awareness. We are a community alliance to help our youth stay alcohol and drug-free. Somers Partners in Prevention is proud to be one of the sponsoring coalitions in the Know to Prevent Collaborative. We're thrilled to bring valuable speakers and information sessions to our Westchester community. It's my great pleasure tonight to introduce our speaker, Kathi Sullivan, as she delivers her presentation, A Powerful Message of Hope, Purpose, and Change. Underage drinking is not a rite of passage. On October 17th, 2008, Kathy's 17-year-old daughter, Taylor, passed away from underage drinking after attending a homecoming game and a series of underage drinking parties during her senior year of high school. Since 2009, Kathi has dedicated herself to sharing her story and Taylor's message with the hope of helping others. Staggering youth underage drinking statistics and risky poor choices also drive Kathi to help raise awareness and educate parents and youth. This presentation will highlight the risks of youth alcohol use, the legal liability associated with allowing underage drinking in your home, and the importance of communication in guiding your teen to make healthy choices. So with that, welcome, Kathi. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you for having me, Kathi. And I don't like you just because of your name. It is a beautiful name. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's interesting. I was speaking today at a function locally in Massachusetts, because I live in Massachusetts, everyone. And I was reminded how much I love to do this. And, you know, the irony that I can say that I love to do this while you're talking about my daughter who passed away is very, it's hard to say out loud, but it is so, so true, because the things that have happened in the last 12 years of sharing is absolutely amazing. The lives that have been changed is absolutely amazing. And it's all communities like you guys that do this all day long, every day for your own purpose is the reason why I'm okay saying 12 years later, it is an honor to be here. I am here because of my friend Laura, and I'm going to share this slideshow very quickly with you. This is the beginning of my slideshow, and that is from the beginning here. I'm assuming it's on everybody. Let me see if it's happening. How come it says stop sharing? It's black. It's not supposed to look like that. Did it not come up, ladies? Ready? Here it is. Can you hear me?
Can hear you, but
okay,
I don't see a PowerPoint.
Yeah, from beginning. Yeah, hold on, from beginning. How come it's not showing now? Oh, that's not good. Hold on. It's not going from the beginning. Of course, it's from when we had tried it. Let's see. Slideshow. Hold on, let me do this for a second. From beginning, share. Of course, now it's okay. From current slide. That is not it, ladies. Hold on. This was working perfectly earlier, so let me just start again. I'm gonna shut down this for a second. That needs to be shut off. There we go. Okay, let's try this. From beginning. Is it working now, ladies?
I do not see your power.
Oh my goodness. So hold on one more time. Hold on. We're gonna get this shared. This is the wonders of technology, isn't it? So here is my screen. Here is my PowerPoint. Hold on, I'm gonna have to shrink you ladies for a second. This was working perfectly before we started, of course. So let's see. Right here, there we go, open. 1 second, everybody. Technical difficulties, not a shocker, right? Slideshow, okay. There we go, now I'm gonna get back on my Zoom. I'm gonna back and share, and there we go, and share. Okay, now you have it, right?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, thank you, goodness. Okay, from beginning, share, right?
Yes.
Joseph up there?
Yep.
Oh,
That's
thank
good.
you, goodness, yes. Okay, so that is my friend Laura's son, Joseph. You can see Laura in the bottom with her daughter and her son and her wonderful husband. And I came affiliated with all you wonderful people in New York because of Joseph. She lost her son, Joseph, and I lost my daughter, Taylor. And I know without a doubt that those two have joined us together. Laura has been sending my husband and I throughout the community of New York to be able to share with her people, because she knows that there is a purpose for her loss as well. So, you know, it's parents like us that can band together to be able to hopefully make a difference when we lose our kids. And that is how I came to share with you, lovely people. I am going to share this with you as well. That is my daughter, Taylor. And my daughter Taylor is the one on the left, and that's her best friend, Paige. And Taylor and Paige were best friends since they were 5 years old. And I always shared this photo because that is my daughter to a T. So if there's any students on this, which I certainly hope there is, that is when my daughter was a sophomore in high school. And if you can all see, I'm sure you can kind of see, can you all see the crease in this picture? So this crease in this picture is actually because I did not want to see Paige's face, unfortunately, for many, many years after Taylor was passed, because there was a lot of forgiveness that I felt like I needed to give her and myself. And I will share with you today that Paige and I are in very good graces, and life is very good with the two of us right now. I'm going to stop this share for a second. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, because I couldn't see any of you, which always makes me nervous. Normally with a webinar, I can see some of the people, but I just wanted to make sure that it was working right. So I'm going to continue to share my screen and then go back to Miss Taylor. So that right there is actually Taylor. And in the beginning of this presentation, I am going to share with you the photos first, and then I'm going to speak to you directly. Can you guys see my face though? Are you guys able to?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good, because I can't see my face. Normally in a webinar, I show up over in the corner. So I just wanted to make sure you can see both. So that is my Taylor senior picture. I always share her senior picture because for everybody in the room, Taylor was a senior in 2008. And that is when she made some poor choices surrounding alcohol. I always bring that senior picture because that is my Taylor all dolled up. She has her hair straightened, her pretty little sweater on. But I always let everybody know when I go to speak at their schools that that is not my kid. My kid normally would be dolled up with a big old pile of blonde hair up on her head. She would have big baggy sweatpants on, and she would have a big baggy sweatshirt that she stole from one of her guy friends. And that is how she went to school every single day, probably like a lot of your daughters and a lot of your students that could be in this room right now. I always bring the softball picture too, because my daughter played softball for many, many years and she loved it. But this right here is actually my family today. That's my favorite picture, Taylor, but that right there is my family today. And I can share with everybody on here, the very first time that I had to take a photo without my daughter in it with just my boys, it was very, very difficult, as you can imagine. Taylor was 17 at the time. My youngest son was 10, Logan, who you see on there, and my oldest son was 19. The first time I had to take that photo was a very, very difficult time for me. But on October 17th, my world changed, just like many of yours have changed as well, I'm sure. We never ever know when something is going to happen to us that is going to make our world change in a minute. I will share with you that I am probably one of the happiest human beings you will ever meet in your life. I wake up sunshine and roses most days. And the day that I lost my kid, I was so afraid that I was going to lose that person, as you all can imagine. But on October 17th, 2008, I had to make a conscious decision to continue to be that person. And no matter who we are, that will happen one day. And I just hope that you can do the same, because it has made a world of difference in my life and has allowed me to be able to go these last 12 years and be able to share this message. Those are my boys. As you can tell, I got married. I will share with you that I actually met my husband at one of these presentations, and that is why Laura also brings us to speak. Chris was in the audience. He was 5 weeks sober from a heroin and alcohol addiction. And he was there at my parent night, not because he was a parent, but because he had suffered with the disease of addiction for years, and he was 5 weeks sober. And I swear Taylor handpicked him for me, because we got married 2 years later. Those are my boys, as I told you. My youngest son, Logan, the short one that you see over there, always said to me, "Hey, Mom, I just want to get as tall as Chris." And I'd be like, "Sweetie, he's your stepfather. It doesn't work like that." But I guess you get what you wish for, because that's my son over there on the left that you see. He is now 6'3". How that happened, I really don't know. And those are my boys, and those are actually my grandbabies from Chris's stepdaughter. I share this picture with you because this is actually a photo from Taylor on the very last day that she went to school, that homecoming night. As you can see in the green shirt, it actually says, "Seniors never fall." And as her mom, that kills me, because that's actually what Taylor wore her last day of school. I was blessed to be able to get these photos afterwards. And as her mom, I can tell you, I am so lucky to have them, because I got to see what my kid did all day long at school her last day. So anytime that you see the pictures in the green, I want you to know that they are actually from her last day of school. You know, I don't know how I stood up at my first school 2 months later, except to say 17 years, 3 months and 3 days for her, totally impossible. That's all she could have been. These photos are going to go now while I speak, and then when they stop, I'm going to get myself back up on the screen so I can see you all. But the first thing that I want to say to anyone on this Zoom meeting tonight is, I am not here to preach to you. I'm not here to tell you how to raise your children. I'm not here to tell you how your children should behave. I'm literally here just to share with you what happened to Taylor that weekend, so that everyone can learn from it, as a parent, as a student, as a person in the community. It was Friday morning, like I said. My Tay got up in the morning to go to school, and I remember going up in her room that morning because I had to grab something. And I remember she had actually taken a shower. She was getting her hair done, putting makeup on. And I was like, "Hey, Tay, what's up? You're getting all dolled up." And she said, "It's homecoming night, Mom. I am gonna have lots of pictures for the yearbook. And I remember thinking, thank God you took a shower. She left in the morning, just like all of our kids do. She walked out the door and I said, goodbye and I love you, like I had done a million times before. What I didn't know was Tay's mom, it was actually going to be the last time that I physically saw my Tay. Because you see, she was going to have a sleepover like she had done a million times before. It was not a big deal to me. I have a huge regret as a parent, and I'll share that with you later. But every single time that I go to schools to speak to the kids and the parents, the first thing that I say to your students and your children is this. I say that I do not want them to look up here and see Taylor's mom. I want them to look up here and I want them to see you. I want them to see their mom, their dad, their aunt, their uncle, their grandparent, their guardian, whoever it is that truly loves them. And I want them to picture you standing up here talking about them. And I can tell you, you probably couldn't do it. As I said, how I did 2 months later, I have no idea except to give it purpose. You know, Taylor went to school that morning and I went to work. She went to school and I went to work. It was just a typical Friday. While Taylor was at school, you see, we are born and raised in our town. I've been there 52 years. She was there her full 17. In the morning, they decided, Paige and her during school, they decided they were going to go ask Paige's older brother, Brian, to go buy them some alcohol for the night. And what they did was they called Brian. He was in the car with 2 of his friends. And you see, Brian was only 20, but his girlfriend and his friend in the car were both 21. So he looked at his girlfriend first and he said, hey, honey, will you go get Paige some alcohol? And that girl, she said no. And it was probably the best decision that that girl has ever made in her life. But you see, Sean, his friend, looked at him and said, okay, what do the girls want? And he said 2 big bottles of Bacardi Raz. So Sean went into his local store and he bought his friend's little sister some alcohol for the evening. He didn't think anything of it. I will share with you that poor Sean, he struggled with a substance use disorder for years because he could not forgive himself. I am very fortunate to tell you that he's about 4 years clean now and doing really well. He's a good friend of mine. He comes to my house for dinner on Taylor's anniversary, typically. After Taylor and Paige got that alcohol, what they did was they brought that alcohol to their first house party. And we have a community where we have a regional school. So we have Plainville, Rentham, and Norfolk. When they drove to Rentham to the first house, brought that alcohol. They walked into the house, the mom was at the kitchen table, and all the girls went into the basement. And what the girls did in that basement, you probably just saw a picture of it, they actually brought the alcohol out. They were doing shots, playing card games, not thinking anything of it. And then after the girls decided to leave there, they decided to go meet the boys in the next town over. And at that house, Taylor was greeted with 3 30-packs of beer. That alcohol, it had actually been bought by an 18-year-old boy who was a senior in high school. He had a fake ID. He went to his local store like he had done before. It wasn't a big deal for him. And he bought his friends the beer for the night. I was told when Taylor was at that game, and I always share with everyone where the alcohol came from, because I don't care who we are, we will always have someone older to ask, or we might think it's not a big deal if we get an ID. I will share with you that those 2 boys have woken up for the last 12 years knowing that they bought the alcohol that Taylor drank, and it kills them, guys, it kills them. So please rethink that decision. Now, when Taylor was at that house party, I have to share with you my last phone call with her. She actually called me. I was home with Logan, who was 10 at the time. I was in my basement doing laundry, and I remember grabbing my phone, and it was Tay, and I'm like, hey, Tay, what's up? And she goes, Mom, we're all taking bets on how much this kid's house is worth. And I'm a realtor. I sell houses for a living. So I remember saying, okay, Tay, describe it to me. She goes, well, it's got a 3-car garage. The kitchen's huge. The deck is enormous. It's beautiful. And I remember giving her a price. And I remember my kids screaming in the background, yes, I won the bet. And I said to her, Taylor, of course you won the bet. You've been in the backseat of my car now for 15 years selling real estate. You better know your numbers. And that was the last time that I got to physically hear my daughter. Because as I told you, she had a sleepover that night. And as a parent here, I have a huge regret. You see, I didn't check up on Tay that night to make sure she was going where she was going and that she got there, because she had slept over her friend's house all the time since she was 5 years old. As a parent, I have a huge regret that I did not call. All you kids that may be on this or listening to this, if you have one of those parents that are like, where are you? What are you doing? Let me talk to the mother. Please know they are doing it because they're trying to keep you safe. I did it every single time with my youngest. So please just let them do that. So when Taylor was at the second house party, I was told by her friends that she actually spilled a beer, and then she took off that famous sweatshirt and she wiped up the floor with it. And then my Tay proceeded to go to a homecoming game in October in 20-degree weather in just a pair of jeans and a white tank top. You see, King Philip won that night. Highly unusual. They didn't have a good football team at the time. They won, and what the kids decided to do was to go party some more. And where Taylor went with 22 of her friends was actually into the woods. It was an old abandoned airport. It hadn't been used for years. They went into the airport, and in order to get to the airport, they had to walk about 500 yards. The first 500 yards that they did, the first 200 yards they did, they actually walked down a field that was grass up to her knees. And the next 200 yards, they went down an old airport runway. And the last 100 yards that my Tay did with 22 of her friends, they actually opened up their cell phone for light, because in 2008, there was no flashlight app. They opened up their cell phone light and they went through a pathway of trees that actually led the kids deeper into the woods. I was told that they were drinking the leftover beer, lit the campfire. And then at about 11 o'clock, my Tay, she had a stupid fight with her best friend. And she got up because she was mad and she was stumbling. And she actually started to walk away down a different path that would have actually led her deeper into the woods. But you know what 22 friends did? They all laughed. They all laughed because they thought it was funny. And then they supposedly pointed her back to go back those 500 yards by herself. Guys, these kids, they were not doing this because they were being mean. They did this because they were all drinking and they were making really poor choices for their friends and themselves. That's the last time that anybody physically saw my Tay, was 11 p.m. on Friday night. I have to share with you her last phone call. 10:57 p.m. I checked her records, and she actually called her best friend, Courtney. And when she called Courtney, all Courtney could hear her saying was airport, airplane, airport. Courtney, she had no idea what poor Tay was talking about. She said, Tay, you got to call me back when it's not so loud. I don't understand you. And that was the last phone call my Tay made. Now, I need everybody on here to realize something. In Taylor's worst state, she didn't call me her mom. And that girl, we talked about everything. She told me stuff that was mortifyingly embarrassing, but in her worst state, she didn't call me. Parents who are listening, kids who are listening, call your parents. Parents who are listening, make sure that you have a phone conversation with your kids that says, please call me if you need a ride. Because I will share with you, I'll go to schools and I'll ask kids how many kids would call their parents, and only half of them raise their hands. So please make sure you have that phone conversation with your kids. Now, that was the last time that anybody physically saw my Tay, Friday night at about 11 o'clock. Now, I go to bed. I'm a single mom at this time. I go to bed Friday night. My youngest was having a sleepover. I go to bed and I wake up Saturday morning and I decide that I'm going to paint my dining room walls. Why, I have no idea. But I'm now going back and forth to Lowe's picking up paint supplies. When I get home, I noticed Tay's car's not in my driveway, which was very unusual. She always came home first thing in the morning. I start calling her. We were going to go out to eat with my parents and we were supposed to bring her. And I start calling her to give her the plans. And I'm calling her. It's 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11, 12, a voicemail. My girl, she never had her phone off. By 12 o'clock, I start calling all of her friends. And when I got a hold of her friend Courtney, she told me about the drunk phone call and she said, Mom, she was really, really drunk. I'm really worried. Now we start calling everyone. When I finally got a hold of Paige's house, I said, honey, where's Taylor? And she said, Mom, I don't know. She didn't sleep here last night. Her car is still in my driveway. That poor girl, she had been calling Taylor all morning. But do you know she didn't call me, Tay's mom, to see if she was home? Because she was afraid of getting Taylor in trouble. Guys, if something feels off with your friends, make that phone call, because it could have been hours that we could have been looking for her in the daylight. Now, I want you to picture this. Picture 600 people, policemen, firemen, rescue workers, helicopters, heat lamps, dogs, scuba divers, and boats, because there is a stupid river that goes through this airport. And I want you to picture them all searching for you if you're a kid on this. Now I want you to picture this. Picture your parents pulling into your driveway at 11 p.m. and they have no idea where you are because they did not find my Tay on Saturday night. I had to go home. Sunday morning, the search starts again. Same thing, all those people. The only thing they find a Tay on Sunday morning is her stupid moccasin slipper. Kids wear them in every high school I go to. I love to see them, but they are literally the only thing they found in my Tay on Sunday. Now, I had to go back home Sunday night. I need you all to remember this is October in New England. It's freezing. By now, she would have sobered up. She was the strongest chick you could have imagined. She could have had a broken head, broken leg. She would have dragged herself out of these woods. So you can only imagine what's going through my head. Monday morning, the search starts again, and it's 10:33 in the morning, and my brother-in-law is a captain of a local fire department. And he actually came up to me and he picked me up. And he said, Kathi, we found her and she didn't make it. Those are the worst words as parents we know we will ever hear. When they found my Tay, she's taller than me, 5'8". She had actually been found drowned in 2 feet of water, basically a bathtub. She had crossed a river up to her chest twice. She had walked in swamp up to her knees. She had scratches all over her body, and they found her laying over vegetation. And as her mom, I can only pray that she fell asleep. All alone, all because of the alcohol in her system, guys. The only reason why she didn't get home that night, the only reason. You know, we all think that something like this can't happen, you know, that can't possibly happen, but I am living proof that it does. You know, the thing that I do when I'm in a school is that I ask the kids to now do this. So any of you students that may be on here, I want you to imagine yourself as one of Taylor's brothers or sisters. Zachary and Taylor were 17 and 19, and my youngest was 10. And my youngest, actually, right after Taylor had passed away, he came up to me and he looked at me one day and he said, "Mom, you know what I miss most about Tay?" And I was like, "What, Logan?" And he goes, "I miss the fact that she was so loud in the morning when she got ready for school. She was my human alarm clock, and she would wake me up in the morning." And I was like, "Logan, I'm sorry. I didn't realize she did that for you." Guys, you don't know how often your siblings are watching you when you don't even expect it, and how important it is to your family members. My oldest, Zachary and Taylor, 19 and 17, they did not get along at all. Whenever I'm in a school, I always say to the kids, "How many of you have that love-hate sibling relationship?" And the hands all go up. And I say to them, "You know what? You don't know how important you are to that person." My Zach and I were sitting at Taylor's funeral, and we were sitting there watching her. And I remember Zachary looking at me and saying to me, "Mom, I have actually spoken to Taylor more in the last 2 weeks that she's been gone than I have in months." We just never know when that moment's going to be gone. So please love your most obnoxious relative, whoever it may be, whether you're a child on this or an adult. Please know that those chances are not always given back to us. When I'm in schools, this is the only time during my presentation that you actually hear kids speak. I'm going to ask everybody who's on here tonight, adults as well, to picture yourself as one of Taylor's friends in the woods that night. And now I want you to shut your eyes and I want you to visualize your best friend. And then I want you to picture them sitting in a seat next to you. And then they're no longer sitting in that seat, all because you chose to drink for an evening. That's what happened to Taylor's high school senior class. 7 periods a day. Tay was not in her seat, all because she chose to drink for an evening. It happens more often than we care to know. You know, every October 17th, I go back to the site. And I go back to the site because I have to remind myself, why do I do this? And I'm going to share my screen with you. And I'm going to share with you Taylor's site. And I don't care what town you live in. Every town has a place. And this is Taylor's place. That's the field on a nice sunny day. That's the airport runway. And if you see those 2 buildings back there, that's the abandoned buildings where we sat with my family for 3 days. And the trees on the back is where the pathway starts. That's actually the pathway of trees on a nice, bright, sunny day. You have to remember they were doing it in the pitch dark. This is actually the pathway. This is the campfire. And this right here that you see, this is actually the river where they found my Tay. And if you can see the writing right here, that's where she was actually found. I am standing on a bridge taking this picture. And do you know what the detectives told me? They told me that they believed that Tay could see the street light from the bridge, and she was fighting to get to the street from the bridge. That's Google Earth. This blue spot that you see up here, that is actually the campfire. My poor Tay, she walked through all these trees. She crossed here, this black line is the river. She crossed it twice, and this is the box that they found her in, right this close to the bridge, trying to get home. All alone because of the alcohol in her system. This is the worst picture in the world for me. That is me on the ground, collapsed when they told me. That's my oldest son, Zachary, comforting me when I should be comforting him. It's my sister, my poor niece, my brother-in-law, and my other sister praying over me. We do not want this to be our family members because they chose to drink for an evening. That's my funeral of my daughter. That is my youngest right there on the left, and my oldest over here in the back. Do any of you think that any of those poor girls at that first house party ever thought that they were going to be here 8 days later? Absolutely not. We never think that. This is my contact information, everybody, and I'm sure that the people from Know to Prevent will get that to you as well. But I will share with you that I have been sharing my contact information since the very first time that I spoke. I will let you know your children, your communities will write to me, a perfect stranger, and they will share with me about drinking, about drugs. There are so many of our kids that never do any of that. They'll write to me about self-harm, suicide, bullying. They'll write to me, a perfect stranger, and they'll tell me they didn't realize how loved they are and how much they would be missed. They have no idea. And I'm going to share with you a couple of emails that I had. And this one I usually share on a parent night because this is actually from a young lady. And it says, "Today you visited my school, and I speak for everyone that was in that room when I say you left me speechless. I want to begin and say thank you for your great courage and honesty when speaking to my friends and me, because in those words, you changed my way of thinking. You introduced Taylor, and I was staring at the pictures of a beautiful girl and happy student, much like many of my friends. However, when you asked us to picture ourselves as this beautiful girl, I immediately got chills. I pictured my mother standing in the place you were, a beautiful and strong woman, much like yourself. I was then overwhelmed with tears. Seeing those pictures of Taylor and thinking about her story you shared, how could something so unthinkable happen? How could one bad night decide the fate of a young girl only a year older than myself? My mother and I, we tell each other everything, and we rely on each other for everything. Her wisdom and strength never ceases to make me into a stronger person, and I'm sure yours influenced Taylor. Trying to put myself in Tay's shoes, I don't think I could muster up the strength to call my mother in the same state as Tay's. When you describe Tay as a fighter, a strong girl who could pull herself through anything, I could again relate. However, after experiencing only a narrative of Taylor's horrible night and seeing the true effect of your loss, I now know in my heart that making that one call will never just be an option. It will always be the answer. I am so honored to have heard your story, and it is truly shaping my life forever. Speaking for myself, the love between the two of you will inspire me and affect my life for years to come. Thank you, Mrs. Meyer, for teaching me a lesson that no one else in the world ever has, the true unbreakable love between a parent and a child, and just how fragile life can be." These are our kids, guys. They will write to us about everything. But this letter is my favorite letter ever. And I will share with you guys on here that I got this letter on Facebook. And parents in the room, I will share with you that when Taylor was here, Facebook was not big. MySpace was. I'm sure some of you old folks in the room will remember MySpace. I remember Taylor being like 14 years old and her saying to me, "Hey mom, can I have a MySpace?" And I remember saying, "Of course you can have a MySpace. I have a MySpace, you have a MySpace. I'm gonna friend your friends, MySpace, yay," right? I did not worry about what Taylor would have been posting on MySpace. I worried about a pedophile coming to get my sweet little girl. I was not worried what my daughter could be posting on her Facebook. I will share with parents in this room, you need to be on every social media that your children are on. You need to be aware of what they're posting. Taylor's Facebook status that night on her Facebook was homecoming, getting shattered. As her mom, I should have seen that, and I did not. Huge regret. Make sure you're on your children's Facebook. I got a Facebook after Taylor passed, and this woman wrote up to me. And this is a letter from a mom, and I share this with every student school that I go to. And it says, "I don't even know how to begin my message to you. On November 15th, my 15-year-old son, James, was rushed to the hospital. He was passed out on the side of the road with a blood alcohol level of 0.308. Now, I will tell you, and I'm sure some of you in your own screens are thinking, oh my God. I will share with you when I say that number out loud to students, they don't necessarily know what that means. They have no idea what alcohol poisoning is. They don't understand that if they're drinking what Taylor was drinking that night, you will acquire that level very, very quickly. We have to teach our children that when their friends are passed out, that is alcohol poisoning. It is not funny." It says 20 minutes later, I was at the side of his hospital bed when his lungs began to fail and they put a tube down my son's throat. They attached my son to a respirator where he remained in ICU for the next 20 hours. I thank you and Taylor for helping my son. James's friends were unable to keep him walking and moving. They panicked when they were kicked out of a party and James was lying on the road. But two of his friends, they stayed with James. They took his cell phone out and they called me. And they told me later that night they stayed with my son because they remembered what you said when you spoke at their high school. To never leave your friend behind, to always have each other's back. If it weren't for your daughter's story and how she reached these 15-year-old boys, I have no doubt my son would be dead. The boys were going to leave him for fear of getting in trouble with the police, but your story was in their heads. I want to thank you, Kathi, from the bottom of my heart. I thought I was losing my son a few times that night, and I am beyond grateful that he is here, and I cannot express how much gratitude I have for your daughter's story. Please know that Taylor and her story are saving lives and the only reason why my son is alive today. This is my favorite email in the whole entire world. And it is because, you know what? We don't get to get Taylor back. We don't get to go back and make better choices, but it's the choices that our family and our friends and future people can make and change are what this is all about. You know, parent nights, when I first did my first parent night, it was very, very difficult. How I stood up at my first school 2 months later with students I don't even know, but I have been a mom for 19 years at that point. I know how to talk to kids. My first parent night that I had to stand up and say my daughter passed away because of binge drinking, it was very, very difficult. But there were so many things as a community that we can all learn from each other. And I was more than willing to put myself out there to let everyone learn from my mistakes. As a parent, I can share with you that I did not always make good choices. I had that rite of passage attitude like many, many people can. My 19-year-old son, he would ask me to purchase beer for him, and I would, because at 19, I was married and going to be having a baby. So I thought he was an adult. I will share with you, probably 2 weeks after Taylor passed away, my Zachary came up to me and he asked me to go buy him some beer. And I looked at him and I said, absolutely not. What don't you understand? We need to learn. There are some things as parents that I wish I did different with Taylor. I will share with you that that day that Taylor was missing, it is so important for all of the parents in the room to have phone numbers of their kids' friends. Because that morning when I was looking for my Tay, I did not have phone numbers that I had had prior. Back then, there were Blackberries. They had SIM cards in them. I had literally just gotten a new phone the week before, and I didn't have Paige's cell phone anymore because I had lost it when I switched the phone number. I knew that girl's home number off the top of my head, but I didn't have her cell phone. Please make sure that you have everybody's phone numbers that you need, because you have no idea how important that phone call could be. On another note that I didn't mention when I was speaking, Taylor, during her homecoming night, when she went up to the football game and she jumped up on the bleachers, that night she actually climbed up next to one of my daughter's friend's softball mom. And I remember that at Taylor's funeral, that poor woman had to come up to me and say, I'm really sorry, I need to talk to you about something. She came over to my house 2 weeks after Tay had passed, and she shared with me that during that game, Taylor came up and sat next to her at the bleachers. And she could tell that Taylor had been drinking. And she looked at my Tay and she asked her if she was driving. And when Taylor said no, she said, okay, and she let her go. She was on my couch saying that she was sorry that she didn't call me. I had to forgive that woman on the spot, because you don't get moments like that back. I don't know what I would have done if she had called me, but hindsight, I would have loved to have had that phone call. If you are somewhere and you see some of your kids' friends that may be not well, please know to make that phone call, because it could make a difference. Another thing that I talk to, for parent night is the phone numbers, social media, talking to, what 21 is for a reason, and we will talk about that as well. But literally when we know better, we do better. And I have been going to schools for the last 12 years. And I will share with you on the social host liability. After Taylor passed, I went to schools for a year, probably at that point. And I realized that nobody was totally understanding the liability of their decisions. And in my community, there was party after party after party still after Taylor passed. And I remember after about the fifth one, and Taylor's friends were there, I decided that I was going to go to the courthouse. And I was going to go to the courthouse and I was going to ask them for my daughter's bracelets back, because they were wearing them. And I remember going into that courthouse that day. And when I was there and I would see a student with my daughter's bracelet on them, I literally went up to the child and I said, can I please have that bracelet back? You are not honoring my child in the manner that you should. And those kids, they took them right off and they handed them to me. They knew that I was Taylor's mom, and obviously very upset. But I remember going into the courtroom, and the media had been there because it was everywhere. And I remember looking around and I was so upset because the kids were literally using papers like this and hiding their faces. But the worst part for me was the parents were too. And I just remember sitting there thinking that this was such a teachable moment. What I would have done for Taylor to be in those courtroom chairs, to be able to teach her that drinking is not a rite of passage, that these choices matter. It took me about a year later to realize that not much was changing. And I went and I filed a civil suit against anyone who had supplied the alcohol, because as you all know, there was a social host law even in New York. And what we did was the following, and let me share my screen with that for you so you can see. See if I can get it over. Yes. I go to colleges and I share about social host law, and I put this there. And I say, what about the mom? I had that rite of passage approach with my daughter and my son. And I absolutely had responsibility. And I have paid the ultimate price for that decision. Also, the underage party at the houses. You know, the mom was present for one of them, mom wasn't present for the other one, but there is some responsibility there as well. The cost of many different people having a substantial contributing factor in the passing of a beautiful young lady, Taylor, who paid the ultimate price. 22 young adults at that abandoned airport, they have paid a price themselves as well, and they hopefully have learned from it. But this is the settlement of the lawsuit after it was settled. And you can all see the figures on there. There was total liability of $850,000. Brian Zuzik was the 20-year-old along with his sister Paige. Sean was the 21-year-old. Matt Dusso was the 18-year-old with a fake ID. And that is where the lawsuit fell into place. And I will share with you that I would do anything to make my choices different. And I have with my son growing up. This is something that someone had written in a court, like a Boston attorney had written this. And he had said what I could do with the social host liability law is very similar to what Mothers Against Drunk Driving did about raising awareness. And I could possibly change the liability for future people to not make those choices. That is why I do these presentations. That is why I share with people. I'm here to help educate you guys from my poor choices and from others and from Taylor's and from everybody else that we know. And we just want to get the word out there that it is possible that this could be your family. And it is possible that from poor choices, you could be living this life. And I can share with you, you wouldn't want to. I am probably the most happiest, joyous human being you will ever meet in your whole entire life. But on October 17th, 2008, my world changed. It changed in so many drastic ways, I can't even describe it to you. And the goal of these evenings tonight is to be able to help people make better choices. And I would love my ladies to show up on their screens to be able to share with us as well. That hopefully we can get the conversations going, because that's what this is all about. So thank you, ladies, for letting me share this platform. I know we have about a half an hour worth of questions, hopefully. Yes.
Yes. So thank you so much, Kathi, for sharing your story. It's very compelling, and I can only imagine how difficult it is for you to share your story every time that you do. So thank you.
No, it does. It gives it purpose. My kid, I always say my kid was amazing on earth. She better be amazing otherwise, and she is, and same with Laura's son, the way that we got to your platform and your table was from another mom suffering just like me, and if you can find that purpose, it does help you survive.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
So before we dive into the Q&A, which will be next, we would appreciate everyone's feedback on tonight's presentation. You can just take a quick moment to open your camera on your phone, point it at the QR code you see on your screen, and it should pop up a link to the survey itself. We will put this slide back up at the end of the Q&A if you'd rather take it then. And a link to the survey will also be included in that email you will all be receiving tomorrow. So lots of opportunities to take the survey.
And honestly, can I say something about the survey? Sometimes people are very gracious on the survey and they don't want to be like offensive to me. I take no offense. If there's anything that you think was inappropriate or you felt uncomfortable with and you wanted to share with me, please be open and honest. Trust me, I'm an open book. I take any type of criticism or any input that you feel is important. Don't hesitate to say it, okay?
We agree 100%.
Yes.
It's a very short survey, but it's very valuable feedback for us in terms of planning future webinars and how we can make improvements. So we thank you in advance. We also invite you to join us for next month's presentation on alcohol marketing. Dr. David Jernigan from Boston University will be joining us, and he is a wealth of knowledge and renowned for his work on the issue of alcohol advertising and its impact on our young people. So at this time, we will begin our Q&A. Joining our speaker is Andrea Fallick, who you should all see on your screen. Andrea is the Director of School-Based Programs at Student Assistance Services and is a licensed clinical social worker, certified alcoholism and substance abuse counselor, and certified prevention professional. She's also part of the Student Assistance Counseling Center, which is a licensed mental health clinic. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Kathi Cucciarella, who will be moderating the Q&A.
Okay. Kathi, thank you so much for sharing your story
Thank you,
this
Ms. Kath.
evening. So we do have questions that have come in ahead of time and also in our Q&A chat box. So the first question that came in is, what is your advice for families with alcoholism who are in denial, who are likely to raise children to become alcoholics? And
I think Andrea was going to answer that one.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, I want to just thank Lisa and Kathy and the organizers of Know to Prevent for inviting me, and Kathy for you sharing your story. There's so much that you have learned and what you have shared, and we can make a beautiful tip sheet for all the parents in terms of your advice. So while children of addiction are at greater risk of developing substance use disorder, and the research is pretty clear about this, can be up to 4 times greater than the general population. So growing up in a family with this alcoholism is determinative, but it is not destiny. And so I think we have to start with the premise that all parents are doing the best that they can. And if a family is in denial about a family's member's substance use, it's likely that they don't even appreciate the idea that family history, that a genetic predisposition can put their children at risk. So if a parent is in denial, we actually might have to look outside of the family to buffer that risk factor. When I started out in my career, I started in a substance use disorder treatment for adolescents and families. And that was over 20 years ago when I joined Student Assistance, which is a prevention and early intervention program. And one of the first lessons that I learned is that effective prevention, reducing the incidence of youth substance use, really takes a collaborative effort. So I can't see anybody, but I know that there are coalition members that are parents and community members and educators and medical people and student assistance counselors, administrators. And that's really what it takes to get out the message to a young person who's living with substance use. And even within a family with a substance use, there can be protective factors. And so if we can access those people to give them information, that's really important as well. So the other thing is, and the coalitions are so important in this, in the PTAs, is that we need to know about the resources, because if it comes to our attention that somebody is in a family with substance use, that we want to reach out to them, or we want to get them to a person where they can talk to, because depending on when the drinking started, developmentally, kids will believe that things are their fault. And so the messages that someone needs to talk to them about is they didn't cause their parents drinking, they can't cure it, they can't control it. And these are messages that will help buffer them because of the greater risk. So I think we have to understand what addiction is and not blame those people, and reach out when we become aware that somebody needs assistance.
No, it's interesting, Andrea, everything you said. My husband, as I said, is in recovery. We do recovery meetings Thursday night, every 6 to 7. So like, I'm very involved in that world. And you just said the 3 C's, you didn't cause it, you didn't control it, and you can't cure it. But I had never actually heard someone relate it to kids thinking for their parents. I've always had it related for the parents with kids with substance use disorder. So for you to say that was huge for me, to keep that in my brain, to be able to share with the young kids that we speak to. It's huge. I love that you flipped that for me, because I hadn't really thought of it like that. And then you also said about the 4 times more likely to become an alcoholic if they drink prior to 21. And I will share with you that I grew up in a family that my sister always struggled. I'm 11 years, I'm the baby. My oldest sister always had substance use issues. She was an alcoholic and drugs in and out of rehabs. And my mom was, the Al-Anon mom, trying to get things, help and stuff. But my mom would struggle along with her. If my sister wasn't doing good, my mother wasn't doing good. And I've heard that happen a lot too, as well, in the community of recovery. And it is true with the kids. One time Chris and I spoke, and this was huge. We were in a high school, and Chris shares, how, he just couldn't stop. It was stronger than him, big football player, NFL player. And he was like, I could not stop. And this was this boy that literally stood up in front of 700 of his friends. He stood up afterwards and said this to Chris. He goes, you know what? You just made me realize that my father, who passed away last year because of alcoholism, he wasn't doing it because he didn't like us. He wasn't doing it because he didn't want to stop. He was doing it because he couldn't. And then this boy proceeded to say that he had thought of suicide all the time with his mother as well, because they were so sad they lost his father. And he said, but you just made me realize that it wasn't something he was doing to us. And Chris literally looked at that kid and said, you know what? You're stronger than I've ever been. Because first you just stood up in front of 700 of your peers and you said that out loud and you shared yourself with your community. He goes, you're stronger than I've ever been. And do you know that we had kids reach out to us via emails that never knew that kid struggled, that never knew he was feeling that, so I think, like you said, you got to be able to give the kids the tools to know that this is a disease. There's not cures, but there's solutions for it, and you can get help. So it's pretty impressive. Yeah.
Thanks for
But honestly, yeah, but that 4 times more likely, if you start drinking before the age of 21, you are 4 times more likely to be able to have some substance use disorder issue. And I know for a fact, and I see one of your questions from Gia is, had Taylor drank before the homecoming night? How can we discourage our children from drinking, and how to resist peer pressure? Thank you so much for sharing your story. I know for a fact, I would assume that my daughter would have had substance use disorder when she got older because of what she was drinking that I found out after the fact. Gia asked if she had ever drank before. And to give you a little example, my daughter had been caught drinking like 6 months before at a high school. It must have been the year before, because it was a football game again. So when she had gotten caught drinking, they PC'd her. So protective custody, the school resource officer brought her to the next town. And he called me and I was like, what? So I went to go pick her up. And Taylor was very drunk at that point, and she was yelling and screaming at me like she said to me, she goes, Mom, I was helping my friend. She was getting sick. I was only helping my friend. And I said, well, I understand that, but you're drinking. Like, what are you doing drinking? And what are you doing? And she screamed and yelled at me the whole time. Now, remember, community school, regional school. So I went from Rentham, which is where our high school is, and I had to drive to Plainville. So the time I was driving, she just wasn't getting like, oh my God, you should feel bad about doing this. So what I did was, Gia, I drove her directly into my Plainville Police Department, and I brought her back into my Plainville Police Department. And I said, hi, my daughter was drinking in high school. She seems not to be able to grasp the concept that it's wrong. Can you please talk to her? And then I brought her to my local police department. They're like, yeah, Kathi, bring you in. So they kept her for 3 more hours. So I will share with you that after that, she was grounded for 30 days. You know, we did the gym together. We like were bonding. We were having those family moments. And so when this happened the year later, and I found out that it was a football game, I thought as a parent, well, she had to have started drinking at 9:30 after the game, because there's no way she would have made that same mistake. You know, like we always hope our kids make better choices, but we also have to remember that they have children brains, you know, and that's why the drinking age is 21 to begin with. So good question, Gia. Yes.
I'm going to move on to another question that came in ahead of the chats tonight. Any suggestions you have to convince parents they don't need to teach their kids how to handle alcohol before they go to college would be most appreciated?
Absolutely.
Andrea, do you want to take
Yeah,
that?
I think, well, it's understandable that a parent may think that, again, just going to the research, there's old research and new research that validates that those kids who are allowed to drink under certain circumstances are more likely to get themselves in trouble and potentially serious trouble with alcohol. So it's just not true. And the other thing is that what Kathi spoke about is, you know, that we want to prevent tragedy, but we also, and Kathi mentioned this many times, that we really want to be clear in our messages. And if you are allowing your child to drink or allowing them to drink under certain circumstances, or saying to your child, I know that you're going to drink, but be smart about it. Those just don't lie on the same page, because once they start drinking, they're not going to be smart. So it just is not something that you could do. And also we know the way that kids, for the most part, drink. So a former colleague of mine used to say that our kids are not sipping a fine glass of wine over a good meal, and Lisa may know who that is. That was Judy Messi, and it's really true. So we have to know that even if we think we're teaching them, we're not. It just doesn't work.
It's true. And, you know, I am a big believer now with hindsight with my life. As I said, Logan was 10 at the time. Logan grew up with a totally different mother than Taylor and Zachary did. No, 21 is 21. Like underage drinking is underage drinking. The education of why it's 21, I learned the hard way. And Logan grew up with a different mother, and he knew that it was not acceptable. And I will share with you, as you said, you know, because kids will think, oh, I can drink a little bit with my parents. Well, then this is what I'm going to do with my friends, because they don't have that concept. Like, think of it this way. How many adults have that concept half the time? How is the teenage brain supposed to be able to grasp that? You know, so totally agree with you, Miss Andrea.
I just want to also add that that while in general, adolescents are at great risk because Kathi mentioned their brain development, and that we need to remember that some of our kids are at greater risk than others. And it's not only those that come from families with substance use, but also our children that may have mental health challenges and or issues in terms of their self-esteem. And we may be thinking that we're teaching them to drink responsibly, but we're really, you know, alcohol works. That's why kids drink. That you want to feel good, you want to feel better. And so for those kids that start to feel better, that are self-medicating, that are distressed, they learn that really fast. And those kids, those young people also progress in their drinking more rapidly. So kids have different needs and different vulnerabilities.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Another question that came in here was, is there a handout that can be given to teens to communicate these principles to them. They often learn better from third-party resources rather than their families or their parents. And as from being a coalition coordinator, for folks that are on this call tonight, I urge you to connect with your local coalitions. They have resources that they can provide to you for your students, for your children. So reach out to your local coalitions. There's a wealth of information and they can make those connections for you. So I just wanted to share that.
Let me just add, if you don't know who your local coalition is or how to get in touch with them, please go to powertotheparent.org. It's a great resource in and of itself, but on there you will also find a listing of Westchester-based coalitions and how to get in contact.
Right. Okay. We have some really great questions that have come in. Here's a question here. Isn't it hypocritical to tell my child not to use when I do?
I think the key word in that sentence is child. You know, like that's basically the most important word in that sentence. You know, whether or not people drink or don't drink, you aren't supposed to have your kids drinking, you know? So, I mean, it's not really a hypocritical thing. I mean, because you're going to do things as adults that we're not allowed to do as kids. You know, I mean, you kind of have to look at your own use, I would say, as a parent there and say, you know, are you living a good example? You know, we're not perfect by any means. Trust me, I am by no means perfect, but we have to realize that our kids are watching everything. You know, so I don't think you need to worry about being hypocritical. I think what you should really think about is, am I making the best choices in front of my kids? And are they learning from me something that I want them to be using when they're now an adult? Is it going to help them? You know, that's my own personal opinion.
I would just add to that we know so much now about the potential dangers and the impact of drinking that's different for young people and for adults. And as I mentioned before, we know that they drink differently.
Yeah.
And so, and Kathi alluded to this, we need to give them clear and consistent messages about that. And we need to tell them, yeah, it's not legal for them to consume alcohol, but it is also not good for their brains. And the part of their brains that they really need are affected by alcohol consumption and affects their memory and their learning. So it is anything but hypocritical. So I just want to add that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. We have a question here regarding law enforcement and judges. So as a community, how can we support our law enforcement and judges to utilize those types of laws or get them enacted in the first place?
You guys had talked about that prior to us turning on, you know, that you have your coalitions and stuff, you know, but obviously the police and everybody enforcing the laws. I think it just being supportive, you know, just be there for them when they're trying to do that, and don't make it something negative for them to have to enforce, because I will share with you that you would probably have liked them to enforce it prior to a tragedy like mine happening. Yep.
Yeah, just to add, I think, you know, what Kathi said during her presentation is that nobody expects when their child walks out the door, neither a parent or a child, that there's that the evening is going to end in tragedy. And so the support is important, but there's a real disparity, because on the one hand, there are parents that believe if action is taken, if the police take action, that it can really jeopardize their child in some way legally. And on the other hand, there are times when they complain that the parents, that the police are not doing anything. So I think a really good place is at coalitions, which have law enforcement, because they have to hear this out. They have to talk to each other and have dialogue. So that parents feel supported and the police understand the parent's position.
Absolutely.
Thank you. With all the peer pressure of being a teen, how realistic is it to expect that one's child will never drink at a party or never drink through their high school years?
I personally think you just got to give them the tools to do it. I will share with you, I've been in high schools for 12 years now, and I have kids literally come up like I talk about, and they come and they speak to me. I'd say probably 75% of those kids say, I don't drink, I don't do drugs, I make healthy choices, I want to be there for my family, I have the goal to be able to get to college, I'm on a sport or whatever it is. So the majority of our kids in our schools really are not using substances. And I know that sometimes when you're a teenager, you think, oh yeah, they are, let's be like my friends. And that's not always the case, you know? So I think you really got to open your eyes and realize that it is not everybody. And the peer pressure, I will share a quick story about my son for you guys. So Logan, as I said, was 10, grew up with a different mother. I ended up finding out that my sweet, adorable son was smoking pot his senior year in high school. And no, it was his junior year in high school, maybe even his sophomore year. I don't know when it was. But I had been told by a family friend, because I'm huge about being parents and parenting together, because we have to do this together. We have to be a big community, you know. And Logan ended up, I got a phone call from somebody when I was over doing an open house. Remember, I'm a realtor. I'm at that open house and I get a phone call from one of my kids' parents. And Kristen said to me, hey, Kathi, can I talk to you about something? And I said, sure. And she said, well, I want to share with you that Logan was over Pat's house and Pat's mom called me because she found some pot debris in his trash. And I was like, oh God, yeah, no, he was there. Let me talk to him. So I'm thinking, this is my son. He basically lives in a sober house. You know, I mean, he couldn't possibly be doing any of this. So he ended up, he was with his dad for the weekend. I went and I picked him up, which I never picked him up, and I get him in the car. Now, before I get him in the car, I call my husband. I'm at the open house. And I said, Chris, you go up to Logan's room and you search for whatever you can find and go look and see if you find something. Well, my husband called me back in 2 minutes. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, you're not going to believe what I found. And I go, what did you find? And he told me that on the side of Logan's bed, you know those Beats, the music things, the headsets? Well, they come in a beautiful case. And in that beautiful case, Logan had purchased this beautiful glass smoking bong thing to be able to smoke his pot in. And he had a grinder and some pot in it. The kid looked like he was a professional smoker, right? I called Chris and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. He sent me a picture. Now I go and I pick up Logan from his dad's. We get in the highway, and parents on this thing, I will tell you, the highway is the best place to ever talk to your kids because they can't go anywhere. So I get Logan in the car with me and I say to Logan, hey, Logan, I have a question for you. Now, what I forgot to mention in the story is 30 days before this, my niece is almost my age and she has a kid Logan's age. And she had said to me, hey, Kathi, you need to keep an eye on Logan because he's wearing a lot of that Axe spray, you know, the deodorizer spray. And I was like, well, what does that mean, Derry? She goes, well, he could be smoking pot. So 30 days before this ride in the car, I had said to Logan, hey, Logan, Derry thinks you're smoking pot. Are you smoking pot? And Logan goes, oh my God, no, Mom, no, right? So I went, oh, she thinks because you're using the deodorant. So we laughed about it. So now 30 days later, I'm in this car ride home with my son. And I looked at him and I said, hey, Logan, I have a question for you. And he goes, what? I go, do you remember 30 days ago when I asked you if you were smoking pot? And he said, yes. And I go, do you remember what you answered? And he goes, yes. And I go, okay, well, I'm going to ask you the same question. And I need you to remember that honesty is the best policy. So I looked at him and I said, Logan, are you smoking pot? And he said, yes, Mom, I am. And I said, why didn't you tell me that 30 days ago? And he said, because Mom, I knew we'd have this conversation. And I said, well, of course we're going to have this conversation. Logan, what are you thinking? I go, what are you thinking? And do you know what my very smart child said to me? He said, Mom, I promise you that I will never, ever drink. The thought of it makes me sick to my stomach. And I said, Logan, what don't you get? If you're smoking pot or you're drinking, it's the same thing. You cannot take care of yourself. And he said, oh, Mom, please, I'm never going to smoke that much pot. Some of my friends do. I'll never do that. And I was like, Logan, how are you going to know the difference? And he said, my friends will tell me. And I looked at him and I said, Logan, did Taylor's friends tell her she was drinking too much? And he said, no. And I said, Logan, there's no difference. And I said, you know what, Logan, I get it. My words had never come out of my mouth. Please do not smoke pot. I would have thought he knew where I stood on this subject, but the words never came out of my mouth, people. So I looked at him, I said, you know what, Logan, we all make mistakes. When we know better, we do better. We're going to do better. So what I did to him, I said, hey, Logan, am I going to find anything in your room? And he said, well, yeah. And he told me what I was going to find. I said, well, I already found it. So now we're driving home, and I want you to picture this being my street, right? So we're driving home and I drive right past my street. And Logan's like, Mom, where are we going? And I pulled right into my local police department. And I said, Logan, I found your drug paraphernalia. It's in the glove compartment. Feel free to go get it. And Officer Rocket is waiting for you to talk to you. And he's like, I don't want to do that. And I said, well, you know what, Logan, I don't want you smoking pot. And until we're accountable for our actions, we don't change our behavior. And he went in the glove compartment and he walked into our local police department and he spoke to them for 3 hours. And you know what? I wanted him in there. I wanted my son to know that he's going to be accountable for his actions and he's going to have to be able to be accountable for what he does. That peer pressure you guys just talked about, I took that right off the table because he already told me he didn't want to drink. And I drug tested that child afterwards. And, you know, a lot of people think, oh, that's really harsh, Kathi. But I've lived the life the other way and I wasn't willing to do it. And do you know, he appreciated that he didn't have the peer pressures of the other kids at that point, because he literally said, hey, you know, my mom's drug testing me. I'm not able to do anything. So how do you stop the peer pressure? I think you stop by allowing them to make the healthy choices for themselves and letting them know that it can be normal. You know, parenting is difficult. It's not easy. You know, it gets harder and harder by the day, I swear. So that's my peer pressure story. Went off a little long, but I think you got the gist. Yeah.
I think it's also important, Kath, to mention, you know, we're talking about all of this, but, you know, I know here in Westchester County, and Andrea, you can probably speak to this, you know, most in the high, I would say 90% or above of our students are making, of our youth are making good, smart choices through education, through communication. So, and it's our jobs as parents to keep that communication open and to give them the support that they need.
Yes.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that, yes, it is realistic to have expectations. You may have to confront a situation where your expectations that your child doesn't use any substances, and then you have to deal with it. Kathi said something really important. She said, I never had the conversation. So it is really important to have a conversation and to make it clear what your expectations are. And the conversations may change, but the clarity of the expectations should remain the same. In that is, I expect that you are not going to use any alcohol or any other substance use.
And honestly, like, as you said, though, but, you know, they are kids. They are going to make poor choices. And I always let the kids know, like, I had a kid come up to me one day when I was speaking, and he literally had just been expelled for a week because he was selling pot in the bathrooms. He walked down to me after I spoke and he said, this is my first day back. I got expelled because I was selling drugs, blah, blah, blah. And I looked at him, I said, I am so proud of you. And he looked at me like, what? And I go, I am so proud of you. You just came down to the mother and you owned your action. I go, just go back out in the world and own it and make better choices for yourself, because, you know, our negative choices do not need to define us. And I think that's the biggest thing that kids need to know nowadays. You know, they can't, if they've made a mistake or whatever, they just need to know that you're there to talk to them. You know, that's huge, huge.
We did get a question in the chat box just to explain a little bit more about the deodorant in the room, the Axe. So I think if we can just explain.
So that was because my my niece thought he was wearing like spray, like perfume, like a girl would wear perfume. So the Axe spray is the, like boys wear like Axe spray for like cologne. So she was trying to say that he was wearing the cologne to hide the smell of pot.
And
I just,
I would jump in here and just encourage everyone, again, the powertotheparent.org site has a section on hidden in plain sight with some kind of red flags that you may encounter by looking in your child's room. So I don't think the deodorant spray is in there, but masking the scent is kind of a common theme. So definitely, if you have a chance, go on there and kind of tool around and see what kinds of items might warrant having a more serious discussion with your child.
I'm looking at the time. We may have one or two more questions here before we have to end the webinar. One of the other questions that came in is, we've talked a lot about clear messaging and being consistent and communicating. So in addition, what is the best way to get through to your child that drinking is dangerous? And what signs should we as parents be looking for?
Andrea, you want this and then I'll end?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think that the changes that the signs that you look for are signs that may actually reflect something else going on. But one of the things that that I would say is that every parent should have a moderate level of suspicion, because there are going to be lots of invitations. I agree with Kathi that most kids are making healthy decisions most of the time, but even they're all good, they're all wonderful, but can make mistakes. And so the changes that we look for are changes in their personality, changes in their interaction with us, changes in their friendship group, being more guarded, being more private. I'd say being more irritable, but being more irritable and mood changes are part of adolescence, so it's hard to discern, but to notice what's going on and to have discussions. The other thing that a lot of kids tell our student assistance counselors is that, well, when you come home and you've been drinking, don't your parents know it? And so it is important for parents to be up when their kids come home.
Very
So
important.
they could see how they're doing.
Yep.
So it's really noticing what's going on, being mindful and addressing it.
Absolutely. And I mean, you're right. Parents should be up when their kids get home, because if they know that you're a parent that, you know, they're coming in and you go to bed at 9 o'clock and they don't have to worry about walking by you, they will be much freer than a student that knows that you're going to be there and have conversations with them. Give them a hug. I'm a huge believer that, check where your kids are going, call. Like, even my youngest was trying to get a few things by me, and it was New Year's Eve, and he's like, I don't drink, Mom, I just want to go with my friends. I'm like, okay, give me the person's number. I called the person, and the person was like, oh yeah, maybe have him come by around 10. And I knew it was the daughter. Like, I'm not that stupid. So I called back and I went, nice try, honey. Parents would never have a kid walk in at 10 p.m. But just be on, just be on is all I can say. You don't need to be a tyrant. You don't need to be crazy, but you definitely have to be aware so that they know you're aware. And I think it's the best thing you can do for kids. I was speaking to someone today who is the head of the Massachusetts. He's the supervisor of the juvenile court. And he said that every kid that he gets in the juvenile court system tells them that they would love to have structure at home and accountability and have a plan. And they would love to have that be something that keeps them straightforward. So, don't be terrible, but just be aware. My youngest, still to this day, he's 23 years old and he moved back home last year to save money. And if he goes out with his friends at night, he knows he has to call me if he's sleeping there, because I will be up panicked all night, so it is what it is, So just do everything you can. You just know it is at the end of the day, you don't want to have to look back and say, what if I just did that one thing that my gut tells me? And I don't care who we are, we all have a gut. And that gut feeling that you get in when something feels off, don't ever not listen to it. It's always my best advice.
All right, well, thank you
Yep.
so much again, Kathy, and thank you, Andrea, for all the insight and information. I just threw up the QR code for the survey again real quick. I want to thank everybody. Thank you, Kathy, for handling the questions. And thank you to everyone out there for joining us tonight. And we hope to see you at the April presentation.
Thank you for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
Kathy.
you. You're welcome, Kath. Thank you, Andrea. You're wonderful. And Lisa, as always, you're fabulous. Thanks for having me.